Evet değerli konuklar, programımız yoğun başta da belirttiğimiz gibi ara vermeden devam ediyor ve günün ikinci özel oturumuna geçiyoruz. Yine çok özel bir konuşmacı gelecek az sonra sahneye. Bu bölümde gerçekleştirdiği başarılı deneylerle bizleri hayrete düşüren bir isme kulak vereceğiz. Gezegendeki ilk Cyborg olarak tanımlanan Dr. Kevin Warwick şöyle diyor. İnsan olarak doğdum ama sanıyorum ki bunun nedeni yalnızca kader. İnanıyorum ki bunu değiştirme gücüne sahibiz. Evet, sizleri bekletmek istemiyorum. Hemen bu özel konuşmacıyı davet etmek istiyorum. Mr. Kevin Warwick. May we invite Mr. Kevin Warwick to the stage, please?
There you are. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Enjoyed that previous presentation. Thank you very much for welcoming me here. What I'm going to be looking at are cyborgs. Now, cyborgs are cybernetic organisms. This is entities that are part biology, part technology. And how I'm going to describe it is through a series of experiments. So this is not theory that might happen in the future. All of the experiments I'll describe are things that actually are happening or have actually happened, to give you some idea what the state of play is, what people are doing. But to start, to give you an idea, and the other thing I should admit to, that they're experiments that I'm personally involved with. So there are, I'm sure, lots of other scientists that are doing very good work in the field, and I respect what they're doing, but really what I'm going to talk about today are my own experiments. I think they're pretty cool, and I hope you do as well. So the first one is now referred to as biohacking. It wasn't when I carried out the experiment, but this is the term that's used nowadays. This is a picture of me when I was younger. This is my doctor, my GP, and what he's doing is putting a little implant in my arm. The implant looks like this, not the thing on the left-hand side. That's this quaint currency that we have in the UK, but the thing on the right-hand side is a radio frequency identification device, an RFID. Essentially, half of it, you see the top half is a coil of wire. It's like a little aerial, a little antenna, and that's how it gets its power. It doesn't have a battery inside, and essentially what we have are big coils of wire in the door frames of the building, which have electric current passing through them, and when you have an implant like this and you walk through the door, the current is induced in the coil. It's like a transformer. It's the same operation. And what that does is excite the chips inside the rest of the implant that store a particular code, which is then transmitted back by means of the coils of wire, transmitted back to the coils in the door frame, which are linked to the computer. So essentially, the computer, with this implant in place, the computer in my building knew it was me at different points as I walked around the building. So as I walked around, we got the computer to do different things for me when it recognized me. So with this implant in place, as I walked around, the computer knew it was me, so it switched the lights on. And then as I walked down the corridor, the door opened automatically to my laboratory because the computer knew it was me. And coming through the front door, the computer said, "Hello, Professor Warwick." It knows me better now. It calls me Kevin, but at that time it said Professor Warwick. So all of this was because of the implant that was in my body. Now, when somebody has an implant, whether it's artificial hips or a cochlear implant for hearing, very quickly they regard the implant as being part of them. It's not like a pair of glasses that you take off and put down, or a car that you get out of and you leave. When you have an implant, you feel it is you. So for me, the experience was one of walking around and the computer did things for me. Now, the same technology is also used nowadays in a lot of animals. I'm not sure if anybody here has a cat or a dog that has a chip implanted. Could you raise your hand if you have I saw one person at least. Some people have a cat or a dog with a chip implanted. I think for those of you that have that, you can feel happy that the technology was fully tested on humans before your animal received the implant. Now I'm going to show you what some of my students are doing. So this is ongoing, as it were. And three of my students have magnets implanted in their fingers. Now, one of the reasons which I'll explain for this is looking at how humans have very limited sensing abilities. We sense about 5%, a very limited amount of all of the signals around us. We miss most of the information. Our vision is reasonable, but it's still a very small frequency range. We miss all sorts of signals like ultrasonics, ultraviolet, X-rays. They don't mean anything to us because we don't sense them. You know, we could have an ultraviolet being on the stage with me now, but you wouldn't know because you can't sense ultraviolet. So this is trying to look at extending the sensory range. So I should say, don't try this at home, but if you want to try it, it's up to you. This is one of the students, Jawesh. I was with him just a few days ago, and essentially he's having magnets put into his fingers. So you see the scalpel there. There's quite a bit of blood. It doesn't look particularly nice, but then the magnet is placed in the fingers. Now I have to say one thing. I'll go back to this picture because we have to get ethical approval, because these are students in the university doing this for projects. And on the forms for the ethical approval in the university, which has to be this official committee, there's a line which says, who is carrying out the medical procedure? Now, you may see when you look at the screen, the guy that's doing this, he's not a medical person, he's actually a tattoo artist. And you'll see he's got tattoos on his arm. But the interesting thing is, you can check his webpage. He goes by the name of Dr. Evil. That's what he calls himself. So on these ethical forms for the university, where it says who is carrying out the medical procedure, we have to write Dr. Evil, which means that it's not particularly easy to get ethical approval. Anyway, this is an X-ray of Jawesh's hand. So you can see the two magnets implanted in his fingers. And what we're trying to do is as follows. Here's Jawesh now. What he's got on the baseball cap that he's wearing are two ultrasonic sensors. Ultrasonics is like a bat senses the world, and it gives a good indication of distance to objects. Now, the output from those sensors is fed down, and if you see round his finger is a little coil of wire. So what happens, as an object comes closer, the current in the coil of wire increases, and that vibrates the magnet inside the finger. So essentially the person can feel the magnet vibrating the closer an object comes. So the person can feel how far away objects are, pretty accurately. Now that's one way, so it's sensing distance through touch, through feeling. And clearly there's possibilities for people who perhaps are blind, not to repair the blindness in any way, but to give them an alternative sense, that they can detect objects, that they maybe don't need a white stick, they can just scan their finger around and detect where there are objects. But we're using it for different sensory input. Another student, Ian Harrison, done his PhD on this subject, and he's been looking at infrared. Now, infrared is like a heat signal. It gives you the ability to detect heat from a distance, which we can't do. We can detect heat very close, but not remotely. So there, the infrared sensor is fed to the coil of wire. So essentially, the hotter the object is, the more the magnet vibrates. Now there you have immediate other uses, because infrared gives you an indication how hot a person's body is. So if I had the sensor on me now, I could scan round and say, you are hotter than you, in a temperature sense, purely. But also, the immediate applications may be in the military domain, that if I have the infrared sensor and I'm about to go into a room, I'm a soldier, and I don't know if there's somebody in the building, then I can put my finger around the door and scan around the room and detect, there's somebody over there, and there's somebody. I would know exactly where people were. I would also know how hot they were, so maybe not such useful information, but essentially I would know where people were in the room exactly. So there's potential other applications that when you're researching in this area come to mind that you could potentially use. Now I want to look at a different type of biology-technology combination, but first of all I want to introduce you to some of the robots, because robots are important in this. Some of the robots I get to play with every day. This is a clip taken from a BBC program called Inventions That Change the World, and it gives an indication of some of the robots I get to use. There's sound. Okay, I'll talk over it. We do have sound on the video, but I'll talk over it while they're sorting it out. So, this particular robot has 5 different senses. It's called Mogui, which is Mandarin Chinese for magic ghost. I'm not sure whether you recognize the BBC presenter. He does a car program normally. And the robot head has 5 senses. It has vision, just like we have. It has radar in its nose, infrared on its top lip. It has audio, and essentially what we're trying to do is to combine the different information into the brain of the robot so that it deals with the sensory information in an artificially intelligent way, in the same sort of way as a human would actually recognize different indications. Is it possible to get the sound on this, please? Okay, I'll keep talking. But what Jeremy Clarkson, the presenter, was asking me was, is it intelligent? And looking at it being intelligent, but in a different way to humans, as artificial intelligence is, different sort of intelligence to humans. What these little robots do is interact with each other. They have ultrasonic sensors. But one of the features that we've got, because people would say, oh, with robots there'll never be a danger because you can always switch them off. Well, what these robots do is to go around looking for power. They try and find energy. If they haven't got enough power, they'll go and look for it. So they don't have batteries again. That you see the strips of metal on the floor, and essentially they're picking up power from the floor. So if their energy runs low, they go and look for power. That overrides any other tasks. So the demonstration here, we switch off the power near us. So there's the robot without any power. Jeremy Clarkson, I think, will pick the robot up, put it down, and then we'll see what happens when the robot heads off looking for power. So he puts it down. There's no power where he puts it down.
Tell him to do that.
No, it's an innate response for that robot. It's a basic thing of its life. Yeah, yeah.
No, his lights have come back on.
Lights are coming on.
So he's found power.
It's happy now that it's getting power. Away to go.
But these then are as intelligent as slugs.
It's different, but in terms of numbers of brain cells and that sort of thing, yeah, we have slugs. Probably you could say we're up to bees and wasps, the sort of tens of thousands of brain cells, is about as good as you can get. Yeah.
Bees and wasps.
Yeah.
Right.
There we go. So those little robots have an intelligence, I'd say, roughly speaking, although it's different, but roughly speaking to things like bees and wasps. Well, the next robots we're going to see have similar sort of physical bodies as we were looking at. So if we look at the picture on the right-hand side, the physical body of the robot with wheels and sensors, that's what we've just looked at. But on the left-hand side, you see it says MEA. Now, MEA stands for Multi-Electrode Array. What it is a little dish with pieces of metal, electrodes on the bottom of it, and into that dish we put brain cells. Now, typically the brain cells are taken from rat embryos. We separate them so they don't have any connections, and then we put them in this little dish. This is the dish. You see the black rings there because this is a growing brain. It's a cultured brain. We have to keep it in an incubator. We have to keep it at 37 degrees centigrade. The black rings are to stop it dehydrating. We have to keep it moist. We need to feed it every couple of days, so it's a living brain. When you put the brain cells in there to start with, very quickly they make connections with other brain cells. Typically we will have 150,000 brain cells. So it's not up to the 100 billion brain cells of a human brain, but it's starting to get there. Certainly more than the bees and wasps and things like that. So what we're going to see now is a robot that has a biological brain, because after 10 days we will connect the brain that has grown, that has cultured, with biological brain cells with a robot body. We will give the brain a body that it can move around. So what you'll see is a robot that senses objects. That information, when it gets close to an object, is passed into the brain, and the brain has to make the decision to change direction. So the only direction changes of the robot are made in terms of the biological brain. There's no computer coming in and saying, this is what you should do, or anything like that. So this is a robot with a biological brain. But I have to say, this, you have to remember, this brain is 10 days old. So it's a baby brain in a robot body. And what we want it to do is what you're going to see first of all. So we want it to detect the wall and turn right, so it doesn't hit the wall. But then we see here, it changes its mind, it turns around and it hits the wall, which is not what we want it to do. But this is just a baby brain. And we put it in this corral, and we can watch it do, and it changes its mind, because it can do. You think, oh, a robot is programmed to do what we want it to do. This robot, we're trying to teach it what to do, but it's not programmed. It's making its own mind up, and when it approaches the wall and changes direction, the pathway that does that through the brain, that we get the sensory information into the brain, and it changes direction as a result. Every time it does that, it strengthens the pathway. It forms a habit. When it does it and does it and does it, it forms a habit, just like humans form habits. When you drive along the same road every day, sometimes you tend to think, oh, I wasn't even thinking about doing that, I was just driving. Well, in fact, you were thinking about it, but then in a very light level. The signals were just going straight through your brain. You weren't thinking about it deeply because you didn't need to. we can get the same thing happening with this robot. So what I'm going to do now, this was after 10 days, I'll skip forward to the same robot. This is the same brain in the same robot after 2 months. So what it's been doing is what we've just seen. It's been going around, and every time it's got it right, and it's detected the wall and changed direction, so it strengthens the pathway through the brain. So what we're clearly looking at here is how the brain learns. We see it there, changing direction. That's really what we want it to do. And then it detects the wall and it changes direction. And every time it does that, that strengthens the process. It makes it more likely that it's going to do it next time, purely through habitual learning. Now this is quite a good, because you have to remember this robot has a university education, and we can see here this is a good robot. It's doing what we want it to do. They're not all like that. Some of the robots are a bit more hesitant, some are a bit bullish, and they go around and bang into the wall a bit more, but they're all a bit different because they have a biological brain. I said we use rat neurons. We can also use human neurons. There are issues with that. One problem being that human neurons take a lot longer to learn than rat neurons. Rat neurons, within about 1 month, they've learnt what we want them to learn, whereas human neurons, of course, can take 18 years, and even then you're not sure whether they've learnt what you want them to learn. But what we can do is not just grow the brains in 2 dimensions, we can grow them in 3 dimensions, and that takes the number of brain cells up to 30 million brain cells. So what I can tell you is that what we have are robots with 30 million human brain cells doing relatively trivial things. So it's a little bit different to robots that have computers driving them around or making decisions. And this, of course, raises a few philosophical questions. We're hearing about philosophy. If we have 60 million human brain cells in a robot body, okay, at the end of the day, I can still throw it in the dustbin, maybe. But if instead of 60 million, it has 100 billion human brain cells in a robot body, shouldn't that robot have some rights? Shouldn't it be able to vote in elections? Maybe it would make a better decision if we have another Brexit vote in the UK. We will see. But it has the same number of brain cells. It makes you ask questions, what does it mean to be a human? If it has the same number of brain cells as you, but it's in a different body, does that make it human but different, or what? Part of what we're looking at here, the biology and the technology link, is of help in the medical world, and deep brain stimulation is one of the areas that I work directly with surgeons at the Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, mainly for Parkinson's disease, but also for epilepsy, Tourette's syndrome, a number of other neurological problems. Now, for Parkinson's disease, what happens is for those that want the treatment, the surgeon will drill a hole into the central area of the brain, the person's brain, and then will push this implant, the spindle, into the center of the brain. At that point, an electric current, a pulse, is passed into the person's brain at what the surgeons call a high frequency. If the person has a right-sided Parkinson's disease and a left-sided Parkinson's disease, then they'll have 2 implants. It will be in both sides of the brain. And the typical problems of Parkinson's disease, as I'm sure you know, would be the tremors, we'll see in a second, and muscle locking, when dystonia, when the muscles lock in position. So what you're going to see now is a guy who has Parkinson's disease, and really he's not able to move around and look after himself. He can't dress himself. But he's received the electrodes positioned deep in his brain. And you'll see the assistants switch on the power packs. The power packs are positioned here. And I have to say, it's a wonderful part of the evolutionary process that as humans, we don't really have much here. It's quite hollow, which makes it wonderful for putting pieces of technology. There's lots of space there for putting technology, and the power packs of the deep brain stimulators are positioned here. So what you're going to see first is the guy, this is a genuine person who has Parkinson's disease, then you'll see the assistant switch on the power pack, and you'll see the effect of purely electronic stimulation of the person's brain.
In 2 minutes, what was the status of Mr. Plessman when he was referred to us by his neurologist in Belgium. And you see him before surgery, without drug, unable to stand up by himself. He's helped by Patricia Limousin, who is a neurologist in our group. And he's not able to do anything of, as he will tell you, makes your life looking like normal. He's not able to walk. He has having dystonia, which are muscular contraction, deforming the different joints, and this is the best he could do without the drugs, with the help of people around him and mainly his wife and friends. He was referred because the drugs were not working anymore. He was not having any more improvement, and as he will tell you, he was just stuck to a wheelchair. This is after surgery. You see the tremor. We turn one of the 2 stimulators which were implanted with electrode into his subthalamic nucleus, which is a tiny part of the brain. And you see that in a few seconds, the stimulation induces a stop of the tremor. This is still visible on the other side. We will turn on the stimulator on the right side. And you will see something even more spectacular than that. You will see that the patient feels again free, and he reset himself in his chair in the position where he feels the most important. He will obey Dr. Pollack in doing some tests, even if he feels that those tests are a little bit useless as compared to the feeling he has. He can do that almost normally. On the right side, should I do it longer, does he say? And he will show it on the other side. And then he will walk. He stood up alone. He's without any drug. You see him walking, turning. It was a few days before the Vienna meeting on movement disorder.
Now, what we're doing with the surgeons is monitoring the electrical activity in the brain. So using the electrodes, not just to apply the current, but to measure the electrical currents in the brain. And what we can do is feed those signals into an artificial intelligent computer, and that computer can then learn, first of all, to recognize electrical activity in the brain, which will lead to tremors and muscle locking starting. And it's interesting that with the artificial intelligence system, you can get about a 20-second difference. So there's signals in the brain 20 seconds before tremors actually start, that the artificial intelligence system can say, hey, tremors are going to start, 20 seconds before they do, and apply stimulating pulses to stop them starting, so they don't actually start. So the artificial intelligence system is outthinking the human brain. But also, it's able to say, well, in actual fact, it's this type of Parkinson's disease because of the electrical activity, or it's that type of Parkinson's disease. And the stimulation can then be different dependent on what type of Parkinson's disease it is. So it's a computer outthinking the human brain. The final area I want to look at, because we're all, particularly as you get older, you have limitations in what you can do. A few examples. I'm sure everybody thinks, oh, I've forgotten, I can't remember the face, who it is. Senses I've talked about before. The biggest limitation I see is communication. When you compare how humans communicate with how machines communicate, I mean, it's almost embarrassing that we communicate the way we do. If you think about it, in our brains we have highly complex electrochemical signals. These are our thoughts in terms of emotions and feelings and images and so on. And if we want to communicate those to another person, we translate those highly complex signals into trivial coded messages. Just the pressure wave, that's all a speech signal is, or even a mechanical message, which is terrible. I mean, it's a very small serial signal that is very error prone and so on. The possibility is there of sending signals of thoughts and images and emotions directly from brain to brain to communicate a bit more like a computer does in a much richer form. So research is ongoing to try and make that happen. Here's one example. This is a guy, Campbell Aird, and he lost his arm due to cancer. And he's been given this artificial arm, but you'll see him flicking a switch with his human hand in order to operate the wrist and the fingers and so on, which is a bit silly, really. What we really want is for him to operate the robot hand with his brain and to feel what the hand is feeling in his brain. But what that needs is an interface, a connection from his brain to the wires in the robot hand and back the other way. And let's assume we have such a connection. So we have an interface, a connection from a person's brain to wires on a robot hand. Well, we can give somebody an artificial hand or arm if it's mechanically okay. We can give somebody an artificial leg that they can control and feel as though it's their own leg. But that's thinking inside the box. If we can send brain signals onto wires, those wires we can send where we want. We can plug those wires into the internet. We can send the signals by satellite. So what it's saying is that as long as we can have an interface between the brain and the human nervous system and wires, just that simple thing, then essentially your brain and your body don't have to be in the same place. Your brain can be wherever you are, and your parts of your body, different pieces of technology, can be wherever the network takes you, wherever you want them to be, even though you can have parts of a body on a different planet if you want. That is the possibility. So this is what my main line of research is about. This is me lying on the operating table at the Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford to have an implant positioned in my nervous system purely for experimental purposes. This was not because I had a medical problem, it's because I had a scientific need to carry out the experimentation. It was a 2-hour neurosurgical operation. This is what was implanted. Nowadays it's called the brain gate. It's also called the Utah array. It's got 100 spikes, as you see. It's very small. Each of the spikes is 1.5 millimeters long. And this was fired into the nervous system in my left arm to make a connection between my nervous system and the computer onto the internet and so on. I just want to show you what I was able to do.
Is the world's first cyborg. Part man, part machine. Kevin Warwick, cybernetics professor at Reading University, England, took a leap into the future as long ago as 2002. For 3 months, a silicon chip was implanted into the nerves in his arm.
At that time, no human had had an implant of this type before.
It was a procedure that until then had only been tested on chickens.
Would the body reject it? Would it affect the way I moved or my sensory capabilities? I could have lost the use of my hand. Could it affect my brain? Ultimately, could have sent me crazy.
Kevin was plugged into a computer which monitored the nerve signals from his brain to his arm, receiving and transmitting them as radio waves. With the signals from his brain, Kevin could not only turn on lights, he could control a wheelchair. And from 5,000 kilometers away via the internet, he succeeded in getting a robot hand to mimic his own hand movements. His most impressive experiment involved his wife, Irena, also having a chip implanted in her arm.
The communication experiment between myself and Irena was vitally important to me. This was the highlight of the whole experiment.
Kevin wanted to discover if it was possible for his brain to receive and feel signals from Irena's brain.
When Irena first moved her hand, it actually felt like a charge running up my index finger. It was a phenomenal feeling. Literally every time she moved, my brain received a signal. There we were communicating for the first time in the world, nervous system to nervous system.
It was the first time two people had electronically communicated by thought alone.
In the short term, we're going to see implants used to help people who are paralysed switch on lights, operate the TV, just by thinking about it.
In 30 years, he believes we'll all have chips in our brains.
But ultimately, having extra memory, having downloads from the computer, uploading from the brain. Earth is going to be controlled by cyborgs. Humans are going to be something of a subspecies.
And a few holiday snaps to finish off with. I mentioned before about senses. This is one example. This is with the implant in place, and you can see ultrasonic sensors on the baseball cap. And essentially, the signals from the sensors were fed via the implant. So my brain was receiving pulses of electric current that increased in frequency the closer an object came. So if there was no object there was no pulses. As an object came closer, or I went closer to an object, then my brain was doing boom, boom, boom, boom, pulses of current. So I could tell pretty accurately how far away objects were, particularly if I moved closer to them or the object moved further away. So having an ultrasonic sense. This is my wife, who helped in a number of ways, and she's wearing some jewellery that a student at the Royal College of Art in London put together, and it changes colour, essentially. But it was linked to the implant in my nervous system. So the signals on my nervous system dictated the colour of my wife's jewellery. So when I was calm and relaxed, her jewellery was blue, and when I got excited, her jewellery started flashing red. Now, she didn't work in the same place as me, so if you can imagine, she's in her office doing her stuff, jewellery is nice and blue, okay, he's not doing anything he shouldn't do. And then it starts flashing red. What is he doing? And more importantly, who is he doing it with? I don't know whether this was such a good idea, but there we go. This was taken in Columbia University, New York, and what the guys in the real-time computing lab there helped us do was to put my nervous system live on the internet, and it was a real-time operation. The security we used, because my nervous system essentially had an IP address, the security we used was that we didn't tell anybody we were doing it beforehand. But it was linked via the internet to a robot hand, probably just see it on the computer screen there, which was in the UK. So as I closed my hand in New York, my brain signals, which did that, also were sent across the internet to close the robot hand. And as the robot hand gripped an object, signals were sent back from the fingertips of the robot hand across the internet to stimulate my nervous system. So I was receiving pulses of current that increased the more the robot hand gripped an object. And what I was trying to do was, by opening and closing my hand, was to get the robot hand to just grip an object, the egg test, if you like. It just grips it, doesn't apply too much force, and that was very successful. So it shows that you can extend your nervous system over the internet. In this case, it was across the Atlantic Ocean. Didn't matter how far, it could be a lot further. And I was able to have another hand on another continent. And the final part, which for me was the most important, my wife had 2 electrodes positioned in her nervous system, and what we did was link our nervous systems together, so that when she closed her hand, my brain received a pulse. So do, do, do, do, do, do, and back the other way. If I closed my hand, she received pulses in the same sort of way. So what we were doing was telegraphically communicating nervous system to nervous system, directly, if you like, electrically. We didn't go into any other medium such as speech or pressure waves or mechanical signals. So the next step, clearly on this, rather than just telegraphy between nervous systems, will be brain to brain. And I have to say my wife feels it's a bit dangerous, so she's not so keen to go for that. So if there are any volunteers who would like to communicate brain to brain, please let me know afterwards. Thank you very much.
Mr. Warwick, thank you very much for this very, very interesting presentation. My surprise is beyond words. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us. Thanks a lot. Evet, alkışlarla uğurluyoruz konuşmacımızı. Gerçekten çok enteresandı. Ürkütücü gibi görünüyor ama geleceğin dünyasında her şey mümkün. Bunu gösteriyor bize.